Hi, everybody. I'm Cara. I'm the founder and CEO of Softer Success. I was delighted to be on Voices of the Future, and please come along, join the platform, have a listen. There is amazing content, and Tarek and his team are doing fantastic work.
We're absolutely delighted and privileged to have Cara, who is a multitude of things. She's an author, she's a futurist, she's a burnout specialist, something that a lot of us can really relate to. I personally can at some times. On various occasions, I've been in that situation. And it's something that we all go through, but never quite go deeply enough into understanding it. And we tend to be in constant denial, and it doesn't happen to us, and we're strong and we can cope, and so on. So it's a very important topic that a lot of us tend to ignore. And Cara is here as an expert to advise us, to guide us, to be a catalyst for us, and really to be an integral part of this conversation and tell us story. Cara, welcome. Welcome to Voices of the Future.
Thank you so much, Tarek. I'm delighted to be here today.
Cara, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey, your how you got to where you are today and being an expert in this particular space?
Yes, thank you. Yes, so I'm the founder and CEO of Softer Success, and we're a well-being company that transforms businesses into the future by creating healthier cultures. But we specifically also do a lot of research on burnout and the science behind burnout and the changing face of burnout as we're now seeing in 2023. And I think my own personal story behind this is that I went through burnout myself many years ago, and similar to what you were saying, we don't always see it coming. And I was working for a major tech firm at the time, and once it happened, I sort of thought, well, why didn't I see this coming? And what's the science behind this? And why does this happen? I started to see this happening with other people and other colleagues and people around me. And I wanted to understand the science. So we started working with universities, and I really started to feel passionate about helping others avoid going through burnout and really look at, changing the way we work so that people don't have to go through this.
Could you define burnout at the very, very basic level? What does it actually mean, and how can people recognize that it's there?
Yeah, so the World Health Organization defines burnout now as chronic work-related stress that hasn't been properly managed. But we have since they defined this in 2019, but we have since done a significant research with the University of Sheffield and Imperial College London. And we're seeing the face of burnout changing slightly following the pandemic. We've seen a rise of fear and uncertainty, and this is having an effect in people's ways of working. So we're also seeing something contributing to burnout, which is called moral injury. So moral stress, that this is when somebody witnesses or sees an event in their workplace, or that's something that happens that it goes against their own values and beliefs. Sometimes there's just a values misalignment. We're also seeing creeping up the concern around climate. So this is also, but very practically, things to look out for, I would say, on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes our bodies will start to tell us if we're getting towards a point of high chronic stress. So think of those, niggly back or neck pains that are popping up, changes in health patterns. So maybe sleep gets affected. Cortisol, our stress hormone, blocks our prefrontal cortex, which is our logical thinking. So often there are signs in our body when we're under a lot of stress, we may suppress them, right? So feeling like small things are a lot to take care of, right? So just this constant feeling of overwhelm. Now, it's not saying that because we sit in a constant state of overwhelm that we're automatically going to burn out. There are a couple of factors that we look at in our assessment. We have a 90-second psychometric test to assess the risk of burnouts before it happens to people, is where we look at other things, right? So not just exhaustion or overwhelm, with reduced productivity. We're looking at cognitive impairment, right? So Are we finding it harder to focus? Is our concentration affected? And is that happening over a longer period of time? Are we having, changes in our emotions? Are that more fluctuating? And are we just generally not, how are our mission purpose alignment? So there are a couple of things that contribute to it, but I would always say as a first step for people, check out the signs and symptoms that your body is giving you.
So it has a lot of health implications, but I think it also has a lot of performance and productivity implications, which I think a lot of organizations are concerned about. What are the statistics out there? How much loss of productivity do we actually encounter in terms of burnout in organizations?
Well, I mean, it's not just, it's a loss of productivity, but there's a knowledge loss as well, which is really, really important to establish, because some research done by Oxford University and the Paris Brain Institute actually found that we are sometimes when we are working too hard and pushing ourselves too much, we get to the point of burnout, we can cause some of our white brain cells to die, which is our thinking brain cells, right? Which is really important, which actually means, that's what I was talking about, this cognitive thinking. So there are longer lasting effects. And we've seen in some of our tests that we've done that when the burnout risk is high, productivity can be lost by 17%. So there's a significant loss of productivity, which can even happen over a period of just simply weeks. So it's very important to take into account what happens when we keep pushing ourselves and we don't take a break, right? So for organizations, you don't want to have your employees go on burnout, because they will be off probably on sick leave. Then there may be a knowledge loss. Then there may be potentially they may leave. So there's a kind of replacement cost. And we're now, obviously, there's the rising cost of living and a lot of business wanting to save money. And I keep saying, well, why would you want your employees to burn out? It's going to cost you more money ultimately than if you prevent it in the first place, which is very easy to do.
So our organizations, especially the HR functions in those organizations, are cognizant of this now, because I can't really imagine going to my boss and saying to that I'm sort of going through burnout. Can I take a week off, please? They think I'm soft. I'm really not coping, and I'm not good enough in my job, and so we do a lot of work through just grunt and hard work, as opposed to having some of the softer side. Now, in the Western world, in more developed Northern European environment, I think there is a lot of consciousness around it. But if you go to the United States, for example, you go to our part of the world, in the Middle East, and particularly also in South Asia, where these are focused work environments, and it's extremely competitive. Burnout is just something you deal with, get on with stuff. How do you balance that? Is it a cultural environment? Is it, where are we in the world on this particular front?
There's definitely more cultural change that needs to happen, and we are beginning to see that. And, data doesn't lie, right? If organizations see there's a high risk of burnout in their organization, there's a team or a culture change or an organizational change that needs to happen. And it may be for specific teams. And what I think is interesting is look at it from the productivity point of view, right? And the cost saving point of view. If you know that your workers, and we have the science and the evidence behind that are high risk of burnout and maybe go through burnout, there's a distinct loss of productivity. And there is also a loss of cognitive impairment, which means they may be more likely to, number one, make mistakes, number two, not have the best focus, right? You don't want your employees, you don't want to see that happening, right? Productivity goes down, mistakes may be made, then money may be lost, right? And we're still, very much working in a capitalistic world where the focus is on outcome and revenue. So you don't want to get to that point. And from a softer success point of view, we want to see people being well, right? In the right energy, collectively across an organization, the right energy, so that we can, then we can deal with the stressors from outside, because there will come a point when there's going to be so much uncertainty and from externally, whether that be climate change, what we're already seeing, whether it's war, whether it's the rising cost of living and everything else that's going on, that will have its effect on its employees. And in fact, our research is already showing that. Our research with Imperial College London, exactly on that topic, on the effects of eco-anxiety within organizations, where we researched this specifically with also younger generations, that can affect their work, and it can also contribute to burnout. So I would always say, yes, this organization, there's an organizational cultural change that needs to happen. And we've seen that when we add well-being as a business goal, this can significantly prevent the risk of burnout in the future. So I would always say, look, if you want your productivity of your employees to be good and high, and you don't want to lose money, just significantly look at reducing the risk of burnout, which is going to save you money in the long run.
We obviously just have gone through a pandemic, and everybody's like saying, okay, now back to the future, off we go. Some of them are actually stopping and saying, okay, now, so what happened in the past 2 or 3 years? And how do we now amend and adjust the way we work from home, work-life balance, etc.? It gave us a little pause. What is your experience during this pandemic, and how can we learn from that as we move forward?
Well, I think as you say, the COVID pandemic was a pause in a way for businesses, for people to look at the way of working. And that's just not our work location, right? That's not just where do we work from. It is the way that we work, right? So are we purely about generating the profits, or are we also looking at the wellness of our employees? And that started to come up sort of during COVID and show how important that was. But I actually think this is a beautiful moment, the time that we're in, for transformation, for starting to work differently for the future. And one of my passions is really, creating a cultural revolution in the workplace that is laying the stepping stones and helping the next generation profoundly, because our next generation of leaders are already looking at things in a very different way. And I think in the future we'll be working so differently. We will have to have climate action within our organizations on our day-to-day basis. Well-being will also be, I think, 50% of the job. We'll have to be working that way, because if we don't, we're going to see, and these are my predictions, we're going to see a lot more burnout, a lot more mental health issues, a lot more problems arising. And why would we want to get that? Why don't we work on a focus on how do we work to our top level energy, so that we have, great revenue coming in, productive employees, but at the same time, we are, we're working, we have the right energy to look after our environment. And I think it's now is the time, right, to transform. We've been focused on an old way of doing things, and living in stress and fear and uncertainty is not the way. We as humans now need to rewire our neural pathways to change our mindset, to learn to live with uncertainty and fear, and navigate through things as our old structures kind of break down, right? We're seeing that, and navigating through them and collectively change our mindset to create a better future. And rehumanizing the workplace comes with that.
I'm amused and I'm smiling when you were talking about the fact that we were balanced during the COVID time. Actually, it was actually an imbalance. I was working longer hours. I had suddenly the time of work was just thrown out of the window. We had Zoom calls all of the time. I had some of my consulting friends who, you know, they're workaholics, some of them. I mean, honestly, they were talking about that they have been on a Zoom call for 10 hours at a time, and their eyes were just glazing over. So where I'm going with this is that I think we need to not just rewire our brain and rewire ourselves, but actually to go back, step back, and think of the construct, the economic construct, the social construct, the capitalistic structure that we have now become completely slaves to. The fact that, you know, before you know, we get into the slavery trap of debt, which starts with a mortgage. You know, the moment you're ready, get yourself mortgaged and get yourself tied down for the rest of your life. And then you tend to just live right above your level. So where I'm going with this is I can keep improving myself and keep, you know, doing my being conscious and so on. But I think, shouldn't we have a movement of people like yourselves who are thought leaders to sort of say, we actually need to go beyond our KPI of profitability to wellness, to happiness, to other things, as opposed to just numbers. And that to me is the bigger pandemic right now.
I would absolutely agree. And in fact, I've just done a TEDx talk on that, where I'm talking about how we need to create this seismic shift, right, where we're moving from what I call hard success into a soft success. So hard success is money, power, you know, but we want to get into a soft success, which is still, you know, we're rehumanizing the workplace, but we're creating an equitable, sustainable, cooperative, and ethical way of working, and something that is really going to you know, equip us. And this shift, often as we see in change, has a little bit of what's the way? We won't get there straight away, right? We've seen as you were just talking about, those extremes, right? So before COVID, during COVID, for some people there wasn't balance, for others there was. Now we're post-COVID and we're trying to find that balance. But again, I keep coming back to rehumanizing the workplace. And I started a kind of a movement a while back called the Work Reset Revolution, which is very much about how are we doing things differently, but not just in the way that we work, also in the way that we think and live, right? It's all kind of, you know, it's all connected in a way. So I couldn't agree more. And that's the exciting part. It's almost like we need to recreate, start creating a better future by tapping into this, to the quantum field almost, with the alpha frequency and the theta frequency, and collectively reimagine a better future, right? So how do we want to be working? I often ask people, how would you like to work in the future? You know, I ask my interns, I ask the young people, I want to know from them and say, how do you really want to be working in the future, and how do you see this? And I never hear anybody talking about, well, I don't hear many people talking about, I want to have a lot of money and I want to have this. Actually, there's a lot of talk about autonomy. There's a lot of talk about good well-being. There's a lot of talk about, you know, not working all the time, right? So can we work? Can we manage our hours better? So I think that's really interesting. And you know, my vision for the future is we will actually learn to work more efficiently. So these hours that many people put in will have more, you know, corporate agreements around it, but we will learn to work more efficiently, but we will also learn to rest more efficiently. So, you know, with that sort of human touch technology, there may be things developed that will allow somebody to access a meditation, or access something that will allow for them to feel like they've meditated for an hour, when in fact they've only meditated for 5 minutes. We'll go back having had a short break, and will be much more efficient in the way that they work. So, and I think that's the exciting part about it. We'll be working more efficiently. We'll be working using our not just science and intellect, but also our collective wisdom are, tapping into the field of the inner, the inner wisdom that every team has really, but is often blocked by fear.
I'm a groupie as far as everything that you're talking about, and I can totally relate to it. It resonates with me completely. However, I shall challenge you with your permission and to say that this is maybe the top 10, 20, maybe 30% of the people. The vast majority of the people are just putting enough food on the table, just working hard enough for a job. And I have a lot of respect for them because they really work very, very hard. Then you talk about technology and us becoming more efficient. Technology has made companies more efficient at monitoring what you're doing, monitoring the pace at which we work. I mean, all the scandals at Amazon, it is working ourselves to the bone. And now our performance is measured literally down to every keystroke, every movement, every time you take a break, and so on.
Yeah.
That's extremely toxic. That's capitalistically driven. And these are the most successful companies in the world. They are the benchmark. Now, if they are the benchmark,
will they be the most successful companies in the world in the future?
I don't know, but they are currently, and for the foreseeable future, I don't see their demise unless you're telling me something different. So my challenge is that what you're saying is a great movement. I agree with you. I totally relate to what you're saying. What I'm challenging is the reality that I see out there where people are struggling with jobs. And if they have to work 15 hours a day or whatever they will, I mean, I take the US as a case in point, where these larger companies, the most efficient companies, the profitable companies in the world, are almost brutal when it comes to worker welfare.
Yeah.
So should we be creating some kind of a happiness index in a company? Should we be create, and including these larger companies, should the unions just be asking for a little bit of overtime or something, or a few days off, but actually look at other measures? Should the stock market be addressing, I'm looking outside the box now.
Yeah.
In companies, company goodwill, in terms of quality of people and stuff like that, there is no measure on the balance sheet of the quality of people. There isn't any. There's this big gaping hole. So what I'm saying is the reset revolution that you talk about perhaps also needs another dimension of reset into all of us thinking differently and create some kind of an index, some kind of a method or platform where you would be, very closely associated with climate change or something. In other words, things that are really important for our future, but we're just not doing enough.
No, absolutely. And I have a vision on that, where I do see, in my TED Talk, I spoke about, there needs to be a true trickle down mission statement that organizations put out there, not just we provide this and we do that, but something that is almost like an employee corporate treaty that is binding, right? In a way that, rather like truck drivers, must have a break after 4 hours. It's written in their contracts, right? So regardless of how many hours you have to work, this fundamentally needs to change. And the reason for this is, I always say burnout should almost have its own expense line on the balance sheet.
Correct.
And it's often the elephant in the room. Like, when you ask businesses, you say, how much is burnout costing you, a year? They won't know, or they'll say, well, I think we have these people on sick leave, but it's hard to establish. So it's often not spoken about, whereas that is super important, because if you've got 40% high risk of burnout in your organization, that's a potential 40% loss of your talent, and a large expense, and loss of productivity and loss of, so we don't want to get to that place. So number one, we need to have this mission statement that's really like more binding. We need to have well-being as as business goal, right? It needs to even be part of contracts and job descriptions. And as part of that, like, we as an organization commit to looking after our employees to the highest level, because if they don't, they're simply going to start losing more money and more employees, because there will be a point when the stressors from, outside of the workplace will become too high. So I really do believe that we can get to this. And I think it's actually quite exciting to create this sort of seismic shift, but it has to be gradual, and it won't happen for every organization in the same way. As you say, the ones that are sort of very successful at the moment, there are steps to take to get there, right? So I hope that's answered your question.
It has.
Yeah.
I think it's not so much that I'm seeking an answer. I'm seeking more important questions that we are asking ourselves all the time, and all the CEOs and stuff. There is no current answer. However, there are a lot of smart questions we should be asking. We should be asking more questions.
I agree. And maybe a question back for you. So around the environment, or even climate change, right? So taking that into the future, many businesses, we're beginning to see some climate investment now, but there's still many businesses that are not accountable or don't really take that much action, and that's globally, worldwide, and we see some countries worse than others. So is there a global solution around this, around accountability, that
Sure.
that would also impact our way of working, do you think?
Yes, absolutely. And COP26 was a disaster. COP27 was just an eyewash. Now we're looking at COP28 in Dubai, trying to do some different things. Basically, lots of statements, lot of pontification, and nothing is happening. My thesis is a much bigger issue, and that is that all of the institutions governing us, guiding us, controlling us, regulating us, United Nations, World Bank, IMF, World Health Organization, all of them were created 80 years ago for a different century, for a different problem, to address different sets of issues. Now, they've all modified themselves 5, 10, 15, 20%, but not sufficiently. And that's the problem. The problem is that our institutions are at the lowest point of our trust in them. The Congress is at 12%. Supreme Court is at 15% in the United States. IMF and the World Bank are at 20, 25%. So how can I be regulated by an institution that's only trusted at 25%?
Yeah,
I think that's the fundamental mistake that we have, and that needs a global perspective to start changing that. And then we should have health, and when World Health Organization should be health and wellness global platform. Governance and ethics should become an integral part of the way. If we can't control Facebook and Amazon in terms of doing it, basically means our systems have collapsed, and they're not being able to cope with all the new things coming in.
Absolutely.
Another one is ChatGPT coming in right now. We have absolutely no regulatory coordinated structure to be able to understand this, let alone cope with this.
Yeah.
So for the next 1 or 2 years, it's just going to be all over the place, and people are going to be plagiarizing their media. Kids will be picking up stuff for schools and so on before we get there. So to answer your question, I think there's a fundamental institutional shift that we almost need to close them down and restart again.
Yeah, that's what I say when everything breaks down. It's almost as if that needs to happen, it feels to me, for us to be able to build a new and a globally better structure that fits in the world today, and one that yes, United Nations, maybe it restructure, but as you say, like, it doesn't match what was created 80 years ago, doesn't match where we are now. So a global environment government, is there something there that is the leading way for us to go? And I think we won't know that until things start to break down. It becomes a bit chaotic, but then we will see difference. So this is very exciting. I think it's very exciting because a lot of people, you know, and I think that's the message I want to give. It may feel uncertain or painful out there, but see it as this is the little shoots are coming up. This is a potential for amazing change and creating a better future.
I'm going to say something very controversial, and I'm being devil's advocate here, and that is that perhaps the COVID pandemic needed to last at least another 2 years because we didn't suffer enough, because the World Health Organization didn't quite get their acts together, even though we came up with the COVID vaccine. More than half the world never got it. And then, you know, life moved on and we have bounced back forward from there and now back to the future, as I say. So we, like the Second World War, it was a complete reset. Like the First World War and then everything else after that. So perhaps it needed a bit more.
Well, that's why I believe
no,
but that's why I believe we have to be prepared, as they're often talking about at World Economic Forum, is we need to be prepared for another pandemic. We need to be prepared for other pandemics to happen. There may be one that will come along that we will not be able to get on top of, you know, and heaven forbid. But I think in a way we need to, it's very clear that you're right, as the COVID pandemic, there wasn't enough time to reset. We got on top of it really fast. And, you know, I do think we need to be prepared for another pandemic together with other climatic disasters and to really move through these quickly. And from that, I think we will get the new systems into place quite soon.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I learned a lot from the COVID pandemic. I learned about, you know, the pandemic of loneliness. I learned about the pandemic of depression. I learned about all of those kinds of things. I learned about pivoting. I learned about breaking down what I call the immune system, corporate immune systems, and started doing new things. Institutions did shift and change. And so I think we should learn from that and not just get back into old ways of doing things and move forward from here rather than back. A couple of final questions. Could you tell us a little bit more about Softer Success and what you do there?
Yes, so we are a well-being consultancy, but we mainly have the Softer Success well-being assessment, which is called the Walk Through the Forest, which is an evidence-backed diagnostic platform to assess the risk of burnout and toxicity in organizations. But I also want to say assess and mitigate. So there is immediate solutions to minimize this. And we do this specifically also for business leaders because, you know, as we were speaking before, sometimes you don't see things coming and maybe working sort of in the old way and going, well, you know, pushing, but you may not, there may be a risk of burnout there. So, and the Walk Through the Forest was created because not only do we know that nature is good for our well-being, but we have a link back to our environment as well. So there's an engagement program where we often link it back to climatic action too. So focusing on the two areas that I personally care a lot about. And then what we also do is, you know, working with this, we work with organizations to you train them and transform them into the better well-being, where burnout risks are at a minimum, where the productivity is up, where there is a lot of awareness and helping them navigate into the future, really. So I also have a book and my book is called Softer Success as well, where it's really about prevent burnout, find balance, and redefine your success. So it's encouraging people to redefine, encouraging businesses actually to redefine success for themselves, right? Success is, what is success for you? And what is success in terms of your well-being? And for me personally, success is being healthy and well. I don't care how much money or how much, like, you know, revenue or clients or whatever. if I am not physically and mentally well, and I'm not living my life with joy and purpose, there's for me, there's no point, right? So we want to get to this bit where we are also looking at redefining our success. This sort of success is very much about being, being healthy, being well, and empowering others to be healthy and well too.
What a lovely segue to come to the end of this session. Cara, is there a final message how you would want your voice to be remembered, let's say 5 years from now, and we look at this hopefully evergreen podcast and we look back? What's that voice? What's that message that you want to project into the future?
Being the agent and the agent of well-being on our planet, right? And that is not just, that's in empowering others to be healthy and well, but it's also healthy people, making a healthy planet. And so that's what I would like to be remembered for, really.
Sounds good.
Being the voice of the success, starting a different movement.
Yeah. Thank you very much indeed. It's really been a pleasure, and we've obviously delved quite deep into some of these issues. I dare say this conversation will continue into the future, and I am great supporter of the direction in which you're going. I hope I can support and sustain some of the work that you're doing and bring about some good change myself.